David Hanlon and Jill Rigney are the power couple behind The Right Mind. Everyone I know who has been through their programs are driven and successful. I decided it was high time I found out why. Here is David and Jill's story.
Firstly, Kelly, thank you for reaching out and wanting to explore, some of the things that have happened. I'm humbled. That's all I can say. And one of the questions of curiosity that came up. What was it that piqued your intrigue that we're now sitting here opposite each other in this virtual world or in this virtual meeting space?
Well, David, thank you for agreeing to sit down with me. But I want to tell you, I am the one that is humbled because anyone that I know, and I know quite a few people that have been through your programs, they're all confident people, they're good business people, and they're very driven. And that was no more evident than when I spoke with Sarah Foster a few weeks ago. So I really thought the best thing to do was come and find out all about The Right Mind straight from the horse's mouth, and you are the horse. So thank you very much.
And a fifth generation horse rider.
Oh, well, there you go. I did not know that. But David, I wanted to start off with a little bit of your background that I've found out. But you were one of the founding members of the very successful RCS, which is Rural Consulting Services, with Terry McCosker, and together you founded that business in 1985 and were an integral part of growing that to the success that it is today. So how did The Right Mind derive from RCS?
Good question. If you look at the journeys you take in life and what always happens, and we may even go down this path, there's bits within us that are unfulfilled and need to be followed through. And we've got to the stage, and there was probably an economic reason for it. Terry's done, I love him. He's done such a brilliant job with RCS. No one can emulate what he's done in creating a change agent within rural Australia, particularly in the pastoral sector. What was there was more to do with what goes on inside the head. I've been fascinated by that right from school days. I was at boarding school. And I got some prize for I don't know what. And they said, it was always books. You got books. And they said, what book would you like? Very nice of them to ask what book you'd like. And you wouldn't believe it. I just read a review in The Age of this book called Relief Without Drugs by a psychiatrist, Ainsley Mears. And I read that book in 1968. It was amazing. And it was all mine. I used to go to the dentist and not have a filling, just practice Ainsley Mears thing, even had a tooth pulled out without a filling. And so that's been underlying a lot of what goes on in people's heads. And I think it comes back to The Right Mind then said, we're about, what is it that you and I can do together, Kelly, if we choose to work together, that can maximise the potential. I don't know how many times we've asked in The Right Mind, Jill and I, right now, could you be doing things better than what you're doing? And invariably the answer is yes. So then you look at what the blockages are, and that's the fascinating. That was the curiosity. And so wanting to explore that germ, if you like, taking the time, that when we set up The Right Mind, we threw all the heads and psych stuff and left all the cows and cotton in RCS. And we did that, and yet we still work together, quite closely. Any cows and cotton stuff, I say, you go and ring David McLean or Terry. Difficult people, they send them here, and I say, you talk to Jill. I'm only joking. But
well, I'm glad I'm not speaking to Jill today, because that would put me in a difficult category.
No. But seriously, I took 3 months then to look at what was best practice in two areas, and there were two driving forces for that. The first one was, Kelly, in RCS, we've had what we call the three-legged pot. And the three-legged pot went around the enterprise, how well your enterprise was performing, financially, how well that enterprise was performing, and ecologically. And when we invariably went around that, Australian producers are best. I mean, back in 2006, I did a global benchmark for the beef industry at Beef 2006. We are the best. We are really the best low-cost enterprise producer. Financially, we're not so good because we love our cows and we drive our cows perhaps not in the way we want to. So financially, we don't perform as well because we are enterprise-driven rather than business-driven first. And then when we used to ask, and I'm glad this has changed so much, when we used to ask the question, how well do you think you understand the biology and the microbes that grow the grass to make you get the feed you need to grow the cows to get the dollars you want? And it was always really good up here, financial not so good, and down here at the ecological side, not so good. And that was the unbalanced pot. And RCS has done a fantastic job at doing that. And the people side of that, managing that. So that became what is called our capability. We have a capability in our genetics, we have a capability in our economic resources, and we have a capability in our ecological resources. And that was all brought home. The other fourth component that we added to that was there was a book called Natural Capitalism, written by three people, Lovins, and Hawkins. And Amory Lovins came to Australia in 1999. We just happened to see him. He was in Brisbane. And that really cemented that capability. How are we maximising the capability? And what's stopping us when people are saying, I can do better? Of course I can do better. I'm perfect. I can do better. That led... I was in South Africa running some of our training courses in 2003, which led to the other real interest. And that is the four forms of energy: spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical. I don't know if you've read, and frequently I'll ask these days, has anyone heard of Stephen Covey? Yeah. Heard of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Probably less hands go up. Have you read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Less hands go up. Can you remember what the 7th habit is? No one can remember what the 7th. The 7th habit is the 4 forms of energy. I wasn't ready for that when I read that book in 1989. But in 2003, I was ready for the 7th habit. And it was beautifully summarised by probably one of the best sports psychologists, Jim Rigney. And he wrote The Power of Full Engagement. I read that book between Joburg and Sydney. I was just fascinated. It sits up here on the shelf. I was just fascinated with that. And that formed the underlying pillar. That's our capacity. Capability we're talking about here. Capacity. Do I know who I am? Am I really fulfilling my purpose? Have I got the mental capacity to enact on that, the mental toughness? Have I got the emotional connection? Family, friends, community. And the last one is physical. And we're passionate about it because every statistic in rural Australia, health statistic, is worse than the national average. And when we go on the sector north, northwest, it's worse and worse. And I don't like that. And so we actually look at what is it? What is the components of our capacity that's stopping us achieving that goal? And we get to some pretty uncomfortable spots at times. Hence our conversation with Sarah Forster. That was really going back into a belief system that she had and unpacking that to get to, what's that girl done? It's absolutely wonderful.
Oh, yes.
Now, that was a fairly long-winded explanation. And when you look at that, those form the pillars of our business.
Yeah.
They're the pillars.
David, I have actually read Stephen Covey's book, but as you were talking about it, I thought, Oh, I don't remember what the seventh habit is. So I'm going to go and dig it out and read it again. And once I read books like that, because my kids are a bit older now, I'm always passing them on to them saying, now read this, read this. So once I've read it, I'll pass it on to them again. But thank you for reminding me about that. But David, I guess that explains to me why the right mind is described as transformational in your approach. So could you just tell me, because you have individual programs that you run and then you have corporate programs as well. So what do they encompass and what outcomes are you hoping for?
Good question. When we sat down, we looked at what makes businesses, and we've always said this, back in RCS, I still feel like I'm an owner of RCS. We've always said, businesses don't fail, people fail. So what is it about people that makes failure? And the leadership program, the Rural Leader Boot Camp is our pinnacle program that we run internally as well as just as a public program. But that whole program is centred on, we call it the onion. You take a good, decent-sized brown onion and it's rough on the outsides and edges, and you peel it back to the pearly inner bit. And the 4 areas that we look at, it's leading self. You cannot lead other people if you're not clear on who you are. And if you just think about it for a moment, you go and ask someone, say, oh, Kelly, what do you do? Blah, blah, blah. I now ask the question, who are you, Kelly? There's usually a pregnant pause. People mumble jumble something, look something like they believe in God or something. But that's your purpose. That's the thing that fuels who you are. And it doesn't really matter what you do then if your purpose is clear. I'm really clear on my purpose. I'm a coach. I never play your game. That's not my role. My role is to maximise your capacity to play your game regardless of what the situation is. And that's what I call the exciting bit. So leading self, leading others, so leading your team, whether it's just a stock camp team, whether it's a chain gang team, lowering 600 metres of pipe in the gas fields or whatever it is, leading your team, then being a leader of your organisation. And we somehow say it's the CEO, the general manager or whatever is the leader. Every one of us contributes to that leadership of the organisation. And finally, we're part of community. How are we a leader within the beef sector, the sector that you work in? How are we a leader within the educational sector? How are we a leader within regional Australia, within where we actually live? What do we do then that makes us a leader? And so as we work up through those 4 layers, it's amazing what people do. Just amazing. So leadership's our pinnacle, coming back to your question. The next level under that, Kelly, we have a number of what we call skilling programs. Power of engagement. The power of engagement is probably 150, 200 people a year go through that. And that is really about communicating and then having a structure and format to manage difficult conversations. You and I are having a really lovely conversation now, I hope. And so there's no grit in it. But when there's grit, that's when we fall back to type. So how do we manage that? And the power of engagement is that. And that's based on our Negotiators Toolkit, the program we licensed still from Alan Parker, the delightful trainer and mentor to many of us in training. Alan wrote the book, The Negotiators Toolkit, and we've been running that for 15 years with him, and I think I've known Alan for 20, 25 years. And we'll do that when we need to really get people skilled in negotiation. The other one's our ladder selling. Our ladder selling has been used within, mainly in your sector, by studs. A lot of the people who sell things to you, animal health people or fertiliser people, chemical people, whoever they are, we generally do that internally. And the other one, which is quite new, is managing outrage. we're getting more fractionated as a society, and the ability to take sides rather than look for consensus. And, if we just take a side against a rabid, whoever it might be PETA, it might be Animals Australia, we don't win. We actually don't build the engagement that we need to get the people in Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane on side. So Outrage has become quite a big component of what we do only in recent years, Kelly. And then the final bit of what we do, coming back to whether organisations and individuals, is that's all good to know stuff. Then there's a lot of people who know a lot of stuff, but execute quite poorly. And so we call it excellence in execution. And that's based on people know what to do. Our skill, and I guess the little piece where we come in, how do we want to do it? What is that we've got to do here? I go into businesses and it's all mapped out for years. It's all mapped out sort of what we've got to do, this quarter, this week, and yet we don't do it effectively. So the little system that we set up of how we do it and doing that, what we call the soft transformation, is probably what gets that acceleration that you talk about.
Mm-hmm. So, David, the rural boot camp, it runs over a period of time, doesn't it? And you meet up every so often. So is it over 2 years or something like that, or? No,
we have run a Conversations for Growth over a number of years, and we actually, you wouldn't believe it, coincidentally, we ran our very first boot camp when the live export of cattle was being held. And we were in Roma, and we took, because it was experimental, we only wanted 10 people. We ran it in Roma, and I'm getting telephone calls from Darwin, because I used to live in Darwin. I'm getting telephone calls from the Kimberley. What can we do? How do we manage this? And I'm flicking, running part of the course to Jill, so I'm saying all these things. People wanted something shorter than 2 years, by and large. So the public boot camp, Kelly, is a 3-day mentally and physically exhausting program. But we set between that meeting and the following meeting, 3 to 4 months out, a series of activities for the individuals to do, coaching with one or more of us, and working very closely with their manager or business partner who they're working with in order to achieve something for the business and something for themselves. So whatever I indulge in order to improve myself, if it doesn't have any impact on the business, it's just that, an indulgence. What we seek to achieve is something that improves me as an individual and improves the business and the performance of that business. And that coaching in between, because, it can be confidential. People just don't want to talk about things in a group. And we've been running it with this absolutely lovely company who put their executive leadership team through, are all on salaries, $300,000+ a year. They put their next level through and then their third level through. Now they run that over a 12-month period. So they've extended another meeting, and just some of the outcomes of that have been phenomenal. Absolutely exciting stuff.
That's the other thing I love about what you offer, is that you do have that individual mentoring over that period of time as well. And the people that I know that have been through your programs seem to regard you and Jill as good friends. So it's not just a relationship that starts and ends with the participating in the programs, but it seems to be have longevity, and that must be testament to you and Jill and the type of people that you are. And I also wanted to ask you, because I know that you're a great team together, and you touched on before saying Jill gets the hard ones. But what are your individual levels of expertise
It's a really good complementary level. At one level, I am absolutely no good at details at all. Leilani, keeps the diaries, keeps all that, keeps the lists of things we need to follow up on. At the other side of it, I'm anal on the detail in building a program. I can fill a spreadsheet, or used to be able to fill a spreadsheet with a formula, that sort of detail. But the thing that where my skills are in strategy, setting the goals, setting the framework, setting the business and operational frameworks to work with. Jill's capacity in terms of one-on-one and reading non-verbals leaves me for dead over and over. She is probably one of the 1%ers who can read people exceptionally well. And we tag team running our leadership program. We run the boot camp together. And in that area, they get, it's not good cop, bad cop, but you get the differences in terms of leadership styles, communication styles, and how we set bits and pieces. And so they complement really well. Most of the family meeting bits and pieces, Jill's doing a lot of it through Zoom, just the way you and I are having a conversation now, Kelly. People are now realising that you can have a family meeting on Zoom. Untold of before COVID-19. Untold of. Unheard of.
There's always a silver lining in every cloud.
It is. And I'm just about to write an article. The relationship between what's the commonality between Y2K, if people can think back to that little hiccup that was approaching the world, and now hitting COVID-19, a hiccup that no one predicted, although Bill Gates did. It's really sad he didn't drum it home harder. The world spent $600 billion in 98, 99 getting ready for Y2K. And in that process, they cleaned out enormous amounts of fluff in their computer system. They put security encryption in 10 times better than what had been there. They enabled freeing up for line time and speed through doing that. And it was actually the National Defence University of America who analysed Y2K investment and the benefits afterwards. And the benefits that they estimated afterwards far outweighed the $600 billion that the world invested in that. I think we'll find the same from COVID. Notwithstanding a lot of the personal hurt that's going to happen, the financial stress that is creating for a lot of sectors, we're going to find that we don't need to actually just jump on the plane and burn a few more carbon credits, but we'll think about it. Yes, I can talk to Kelly sitting 700k away right now and have this conversation. Yes, I can trust my people, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to change. It's going to change. And I think a lot of those changes will benefit everyone.
Mm-hmm. David, in your experience, what do you think are some of the most important things that we can do to live well?
Kelly, number one is be clear on your purpose. If you don't know who you are, there's a chances are you're a restless soul. And restless souls chase rather than seek. And that sort of comes from the Buddhist philosophy of life. And the Benedictine monks, I was brought up with no religion whatsoever. In that area, when you look at it, knowing self is the first one, and being content with self. If you can do that, and then be positive about the things that you can control rather than being anxious about the things that you can't control. Because anxiety just increases cortisol off the planet. The more we have anxiety, and when you look at that, if you go back to those four capabilities, the four forms of energy, spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical, and the top one is not God, it's purpose. Who am I? The inner person. The majority of people in the Western world, and sadly in Australia, and if you think, let's just think of those as muscles. No, the physical I've already mentioned. We're in rural Australia. We're worse off on every attribute than we are in Australian statistics. Purpose. Western people are understretched. They don't tensile that muscle. We're materialistically driven for more and more things to make us satisfied. And yet we're overstressed mentally and emotionally. We're time poor. We're racing to add more things, to do bits and pieces. For what purpose? And right now, to live well, it starts with purpose. And ask yourself, I spent a week with the Amish in the 90s, and that was fascinating. Their leaders had two questions, beautiful questions, Kelly. The first question, is it necessary? And the second question, what will be the impact on our children? Follow those two and you can live pretty well.
Yeah. I love what you said, particularly about inner knowing, because I think that is the base of living a good life, because you are guided. I have no doubt. Like you know in your heart if you're in the wrong place, or you know, I remember a time in my life when I was in the wrong place and I just kept having this feeling that I was missing out on something, and I don't have that feeling anymore. Thankfully, I made choices, you know, and changed what I was doing. So, and to me, that was my inner knowing and something saying to me, you know, you've got to change things. So, I think if we can follow that, those gut feelings is so important to living a happy and as you said, contented life.
I think you've already demonstrated one extra thing there, Kelly, and well done. And that is the courage to change. There are many people who live in what we term, Jill and I, comfortable misery. Life's comfortable enough, but I don't have deep satisfaction. And it takes courage to step out of this world into that world. And well done.
Thank you. I feel like I've had my very first right mind lesson and I've gone to the top of the class.
Well done.
Thank you. David, I wanted to ask you, and I've chatted with you about this before to make sure it was okay with you, but I wanted to talk about your health, because your health hasn't been great, mainly to create some awareness around becoming a bone marrow donor. And I've actually looked up, and I'm too old because I found out you have to be between 18 and 45. So do you mind just sharing your journey around your health and where? Yeah.
Not at all. Kelly, to have a dart land on you called myeloma dysplasia syndrome was a bit of a shock, because here's a person who has always considered myself with the fitness of a 35-year-old, you know, climbing the highest mountains on a bike in Europe, doing the most longest endurance rides here in Australia and so on, all over 60. And to discover that I just didn't have the power that I had. So I was putting it down to all things, having broken my knee twice in 9 days. It's the knee, you know, and it took probably 18 months before I was confirmed with myeloma dysplasia syndrome, which is quite a rare blood cancer. And some people don't even call it a cancer, because what it means is either your red blood cells, your white blood cells, your neutrophils, or your platelets don't mature, and they float around inside your bone marrow as blasts and fill it up. So here I was doing 10 to 12,000 K a year on my bike, and now I do about 3 if I'm really lucky. I just didn't have the oxygen because I don't have the hemoglobin cells. And the other thing is, because my neutrophils are so low, I'm very susceptible to getting an infection or something like that. So I have to be very careful. But I can still smile. I can still go out and ride my bike on a good day, and then do plenty of gardening, and then come and annoy Jill and say I'm going to write a little article or whatever. But But what was interesting, and so it piqued my curiosity as I had to go back, was that when you look at that, and you look at the number of people, it's about 460,000 people give blood annually. And those total bags of blood that are given are well over 1 million. So it's about fourfold on the number of people who give blood in terms of the total blood that's given. But if you look at the Australian Bone Marrow Registry, there's only 170,000 on that registry. So it's well under half the number of people who give blood. And part of the reason is the best, you looked it up, 18 to 45. But in order to get the best successes for transfers, for bone marrow transfers, they like you to be between 18 and 30. And when you look at the statistics of people who give blood, a lot more people are over 30 who give blood. And then you look at the total number of bone marrow transplants, and I looked it up just to make sure I had the right number for you. The total number of bone marrow transplants that were done last year off their own annual report were at 360 in Australia. So that's fairly good. Of those, only 70 matches came from Australia. The rest were found overseas. So the bone marrow people, and I rang the centre at the Royal Brisbane Hospital, and I said to them, "What can I say and what can't I say? Could I just make sure it's all right?"
Oh, good on you, David.
And as you said, ask people when they give blood. Firstly, to give blood because it's really good, and the Bone Marrow Transplant Registry, would love more people to be registered, because to be registered, it's just taking a swab, with a little earbud on your cheek. That's all it is to check your DNA. So it's not even an injection, and probably because what we do here is you have to opt in rather than opt out. So people give blood, they've got to tick, yes, I'm willing to donate bone marrow, and so it suddenly alerted me to the fact that, because I said to them, why haven't I done this? I've given blood. And that's what they explained, And for the Indigenous community, there's only 1% chance of being matched, because our blood types, whether we're Asian, whether we're African or Indigenous Australians, we have a different bone marrow makeup. So bone marrow for you and I comes from Caucasians, and 80% of the bone marrow in transplant stem cells come from Germany and Italy.
So, David, I wonder if people are a little bit scared if they, elect to have that test taken, that they might end up having to give their bone marrow. Are they scared of what that entails, do you think? Or
well, firstly, the probability of being called up is 1 in 1,500 per year. So it's very rare that if you're on the register that you'll actually get called up. And the process is 1 week of getting some stem cell, increase the population of stem cells, injections once a day. And then it is 1 day in hospital where they take your blood out of one arm, put it through a centrifuge that pulls the stem cells off and recirculate your blood back into your body. Oh. But it takes a day to get the stem cell from the... You've got to ever think, we've got 5 or 6 litres of blood, and I don't know how many times that blood circulates.
Oh, science is amazing, isn't it? Just incredible.
Okay.
David, I'm sure that if you were the 1 in 1,500 people that were called up, that the glory of being able to help save someone's life would more than compensate for any discomfort. So I am certainly going to encourage 2 of my children who are between 18 and 30 to go and give some blood and offer to donate their bone marrow, and the other one I'll encourage her to line up when she's 18 too. So that's really great to know, and hopefully people watching and listening to this will encourage the younger ones in their families to do the same, and because what a great thing to be able to do to save someone's life. So David, thank you. I am so grateful to you, and I am looking forward to coming and meeting both yourself and Jill when I'm in Brisbane, when all this COVID thing is over.
Thank you. It's been absolutely a delight. Firstly, talking to you on the phone as we did, and now seeing you face to face. Thanks for making the time. Thanks for reaching out. Look forward to more conversations with you in person.
Thank you, David.
My absolute pleasure. I'm humbled. Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching our video. I hope you enjoyed it, and please try to remember to just click on the subscribe button so we can keep you updated with everything that's happening. Thank you.